So, I have been thinking about the problem of consciousness and mind in general. And it seems to me that any account of the mind-body problem, i.e., how we account for mental phenomena, how we account for consciousness, etc., is very incomplete if it does not explain the evolution of consciousness. Because, of course, as beings of the earth, as animals, we have evolved just like every other animal. And so our mental faculties, our mind, must somehow have a story behind it. It must somehow come to exist through evolution, or at least parallel to evolution in some kind of way. Which is why the problem is so difficult. You see, mental phenomena and mind in general seems so much different than every other physical characteristic that we have, that it indeed becomes very, very weird in the picture of evolution. And recently, I think I stumbled across a general problem that doesn't just contain itself to consciousness, conscious thinking, etc., but even just emotion and feelings. So let's ask the question of why would emotions evolve? Why would we come to have emotions in an evolutionary context? Now, the easiest answer and the first answer that comes to mind to most people is, of course, the survival value that you receive from emotions when they take their effect on you. So, for example, when you are in fear, you are very highly alert, you are ready to go into fight or flight, and you are much more likely to survive if there is immense danger and you are afraid. If you are not afraid and there is immense danger, you may in fact die. So, this seems to be a very plausible explanation for the evolution of fear. And again, we can do the same with other emotions. When you're, let's say, in love with someone, you're much more likely to take care of them, you're much more likely to sort of take care of the children you're going to have in the future with them. So it makes sense that you would have something akin to love. But here is the problem. All of this survival value that you receive from emotions comes out of the purely cognitive and purely physiological changes that emotions inflict upon you. It does not come as a result of the feeling itself. Let's analyze this to make sure that you understand what I mean. There is a cognitive and a physiological aspect to emotion. When you feel fear, there are certain hormones that get released, there are certain parts of the brain that become more activated than others, and all of this makes your body be ready to either fight or flight, etc. It prepares your body for danger in a physiological way. There's also a cognitive aspect, which is the kind of thinking that happens when you are in fear, when fear takes over your brain. The kind of thinking that you have becomes completely different because you become hyper-focused on the danger and you start thinking only about the current situation that you are in. You have no time to think for other things, and thus your cognitive faculties change their functions. So all of that is great and it has great survival value. But let us think counterfactually here. Couldn't you have the effect of fear, which is those physiological changes that prepare your body and those cognitive changes that sharpen your mind for the situation? Couldn't you have all of those things without the actual feeling of fear? Couldn't you in fact make a robot that can change its cognitive faculties according to a situation without actually feeling something? I think this is obvious. I think in fact we already know the answer to this because we have made very complicated robots and very complicated language models and artificial intelligence. You can see that when you change the context of a conversation with ChatGPT, for example, ChatGPT is going to have a different way of thinking. Its structure, its cognitive structure that goes behind its answers is going to change. And that's because it is trained to respond to stimuli in a proper fashion. That doesn't mean that ChatGPT actually feels any different about the kind of answer that it gives you. And now I have found that people, when they are confronted with this problem, this question, they seem to regress back to, well, without emotions, why wouldn't you, say, kill someone or do this or do that? Like, they will try to see emotions as the driving factor behind our behavior or our moral thinking, stuff like that, or maybe empathy, etc. But notice how I have already been very clear about the cognitive changes. Like, you can still have cognitive change without any emotion behind it. Like, let's think about motivation for a minute, right? When you're motivated to do something, that's obviously reflected in some sort of feeling, but not always. Would you say that you are always feeling the motivation to, say, have children in the future, or the motivation to, like, not die? These aren't things that you are currently feeling consciously, but they're definitely the deep-seated motivations behind much of your behavior. They affect you whether you feel them or not. And again, I go back to ChatGPT. Is ChatGPT in any way feeling motivated to help you with your exams? Well, no, but its program has certain values attached to its base. Like, when you program ChatGPT, you are programming it for the purpose of helping you. And thus, its cognitive structure is such that it will simply want to help you no matter the feeling or absence of feeling. This is what it's programmed to do. And we can look at even some living animals that are like this. Think about, like, very low animals that clearly don't have active emotions. They still reproduce, they still avoid death, even though they lack the feeling of motivation. So it's pretty clear that you can have a system of cognition with purposes without an active emotion. So again, why would emotion appear? Like, why would feelings appear in an evolutionary context for any animal? It seems like an extravagant thing. Like, it seems like a very expensive thing to get for in an evolutionary context for, like, no return on the investment. So it just seems very, very weird that something like that would appear. And when you think about moral actions and things like that, people will say, well, emotions keep you from being like a psychopath or something. But you have to understand, psychopaths who do bad stuff have emotions. It's just that they mostly have positive emotions. They feel good about, getting money, being fed, all of those things. They feel those things. It's not like they're completely emotionless. Someone being completely emotionless would look more like a machine than a psychopath who does bad stuff, because they don't have the motivation to do good. Sure, they don't have the feeling of motivation of doing good, sure, but they also don't have any bad feelings or any bad motivations to do bad. So it's like, no, it's not as if you need emotions to act. You need the feeling of emotion, at least, to act morally or to not go ahead and do everything that is in your interest. There is something called game theory. I mean, you can look up that if you're in a social context, and humans clearly are in a social context, it simply doesn't make sense logically to act like a psychopath. It makes sense to be pro-social, which is why we are pro-social. It's a purely cognitive game here. You don't need any feeling to have a human being that acts in accordance to their interest of staying alive and reproducing, etc., without becoming psychopathic. It is exactly those motivations, those base values, that make humans pro-social, actually. So, again, we run into this problem. We seem to have the mental feeling, the mental, how would you call it? The mental state of feeling something, and yet it seems completely arbitrary. It seems like something that doesn't help you with anything. You could change your cognitive capacity and your physiological constitution towards a certain way of thinking and a certain way of acting without feeling it, without feeling that emotion. So the reason I'm making this is to see, is to examine the real difficulty of the mind-body problem. Like, it's not just that consciousness, because people talk about consciousness as if it's like it can be anything and everything. It's not like there's this one word of consciousness and we can't just, explain this one thing. Feelings in general are the problem here. It seems that our explanations are very insufficient when it comes to the evolution of emotion, feeling, conscious thinking, and everything of the sort. And so, if any of you are like biologists or anything, please comment down below your thoughts about this. But it just strikes me as very odd that beings, that animals in general, that are programmed to simply survive and reproduce, would get something like conscious feeling of their emotional states. So I don't see a solution to this problem that is in any way easy or economical. So yeah, if you find this interesting, please comment your opinions and support the channel. So for now, thank you.